Hello everyone and welcome to another series in Red Dragon. This time we are starting a new series of videos where I'm going to review nation by nation all the nations in Red Dragon. Of course there are a lot of them, so it's going to take a lot of time. But well, you will be able to see each deck in detail, and the objective of this is not just, or at least not really, going one by one through all the units and giving individual views on each of them, but rather to give an overall view of nations, what they are good for, what they are not that good for, where they are strong, where they are weaker, etc. So it's kind of an overall view and not an in detail view of the units. So for starting this series, I have chosen the USSR, probably because it's one of the most complete nations in Wargame Red Dragon. Now there's a lot of complaining about NATO being, or Blue Force being more powerful than Red Force. I don't specifically agree with that assessment. I think that Red Force is extremely strong if you know how to use it, but the caveat is there if you know how to use it. So I think it's pretty good to give an overall idea of what these nations are good for and what they are not that good for. What we are going to do is to, well, go in each one of the categories. Naval will go in a totally different video, which is going to be independent from the nations, because Naval is independent from the nations. You get stuff from China, South Korea, not just the USSR. And at the end, I will give an overall view of well, the kind of decks you can build with this particular nation I'm analyzing, and giving a view on well, which decks are viable and which ones are not so viable. Now, as I said, let's start with the Soviet Union. And let's start with logistics. Now, in logistics, the Soviet Union is very complete, extremely complete. You have a lot of choices to make. And the first one is which command unit you want and how many of them you want. Now, the obvious choices are APCs because they are the more versatile ones. They come in good availability and they are armored. However, you have extremely strong command tanks. So maybe packing one of those is not that bad, especially so if you really plan on going into contested areas and to contest enemy capture zones. Especially so for conquest, these units are very strong. The T-80 UK is the best command tank in the game, bar none. It's almost a T-80U with the reflex missile and cannon. It's extremely strong. The T-72 is a cheaper, solid option if you wanted to, but it's extremely strong in that. Now, in command infantry, there's not a lot of things to be said, and the helicopter command vehicle is not exceptionally good because it's extremely slow. Logistics is really, again, really good because you have a lot of options. You can go for armored, not that capable supply units. You can go for an armored supply trucks with somewhat higher capacity instead of the armor, and you have the big choppers, the ME6 and the ME26. So it's up to you to make the choices you want when you are making this a deck. Now, the thing here, the thematic is that you have things for everything. As for infantry, well, overall, you get extremely good transport, extremely good transport, because you get beasts as the where it is, the BMP3, which is a brutal transport, brutal transport with Arcan ATGMs, 100mm guns, and an autocannon on top of that. This is a BMP-T, but with lower armor, and also Carvis troops, which is extremely good. This is brutal. Then you also have the BTR, there it is, BTR 90, with a Concurse M and an autocannon, and extremely quick and 100% off-road, which is brutal. Really good unit. You have the BMPs, which are all of them really good units. You have the BTRs, which are extremely fast and have a pretty nice machine gun. And you have the helicopters, which usually come from ME8s to Mi-24s. Now the Mi-24s, the ones that you are using for transports, they are not combat units. Now remember that this is not an attack chopper, this is a transport chopper. And that's because the ATGM is actually pretty crappy. The best you get in a 55-point helicopter, which is pretty expensive, is a Fleta, and the Fleta is crap. Let's face it, it's slow, it has a terrible accuracy, it's very bad. They are very good for supporting your infantry while it's landing because they have rockets, they have a machine gun, but remember this is no attack chopper. Use it as a support one and they will be golden. Use it as an attack chopper and you're going to lose them. As for the infantry themselves, well, more choppers, you have also the Hormone, which is extremely good. And you have, well, very different versions in different units because you also have the BTR-RD, which has ATMs, has machine guns. For instance, where it is, the robot is there. There's Rexted, this one, has a pretty amazing autocannon, which is extremely good against helicopters. So, yeah, you have a lot of different options to tailor for whatever you want your units to have. You want to have the infantry plus some AA support, you can because you have the choice. You want the infantry with some ATGM support, you will have it in your vehicles. You want it with autocannon support, you will have it, and all of them in very capable units. Now, as for the infantry themselves, extremely good ATGMs. The Golden Ostreski has the best ATGM in the game, the Medicem. In my opinion, this is the best one. Doesn't have the range to be as well long-reaching as other ATGMs, but the missile itself is brutal. This thing one-shots Abrams. And then you have Factorillas, Concours, and Concursems. Of course, this means that you have extremely good choices whether you want not that great ATMs or you want great ATMs, but the great ATMs come at a much lower availability and they are more expensive. So you have the flexibility to choose exactly what you want. Exactly the same for manpads. You have the Iglas, the Igla M, and the Strola 3. Now the Strola 3 is not that great, but you can get a lot of them. The Igla is mid-ground, you get a decent number of them, the missile is pretty good. And then the Igla 1M, which is brutal, has a brutal range, has very good AC power and high accuracy, but you get less of them per card. So again, you will pick your choice and you will pick whatever you want to fit your deck, the better. Now, well, flamethrower infantry is pretty much standard. They massacre enemies in the woods. Now, special forces, they are really good, the Space Nats. They have a napalm thrower, which is brutal against enemy infantry in the woods, in cities, etc. At close range, this thing is brutal against enemy infantry. They are a little bit lacking against enemy armor because they don't have any 80 rocket, but still they are very good. And finally, the shock troops, the BDB, which comes in two flavors. I'm going to generally look at the 90s versions of all the decks. Extremely good anti-tank rocket, very good rifle, very good machine gun. So really good unit. And you also have the Marines, the Moskaya Pehota, which are up here, which are different from the BDB because they get a worse anti-tank rocket. They get the same machine gun and assault rifle, but they come in 15 strong units. So it's kind of deciding whether you want one kind of shock troops or the other. Also, the transport is slightly different because, of course, one of them is for Marines and the other one is not. So, yep. And well, of course, finally, the standard rifleman, which is the Motostreski, is, well, a decent unit. It's nothing to speak home about. Support. Now, this is one of the strongest points of the Soviet Union because you have everything. Now, I'm not kidding. You have everything. Let's go one by one. Now, you have the Tungus KM, which is, in my opinion, the best AA in the whole game. Mostly because it has everything. It has anti-aircraft guns with huge range for a gun. It has anti-aircraft missiles with huge range for an anti-aircraft missile. This thing murders Lombos, murders them. Really, this thing is the anti-chopper definite thing, and they are extremely good against enemy planes as well. So for me, this is the best AA unit in the game, bar none. Now you have a less capable Tunguska, which is not as good, has somewhat less range in the missiles. The guns are pretty much the same, but comes in higher availability. So again, you have the choice whether you want the more expensive, less available Tunguska M, or a still brutal AA unit in the vanilla Tunguska. Now you have also the standard and normal AA units. You have the Ural ZU 23, which is not extremely good. Now, one of the things here is that it's not radar guided, so it can't be targeted by SEED. It still has a respectable range and is extremely fast in road speeds. So this is quite good for openers, but for the mid and late game, it simply doesn't count it. It simply doesn't have enough accuracy, range. It's not really a good unit. Of course, the thing here is that you can put a lot of them. So again, that is not that good doesn't mean it's useless. Again, it's up to you to decide. And then you get the Silkas. You get, well, the Silka and the Virius, which is an improved Silka. Now, as you can see, the difference between both is mostly the range of the gun. And the accuracy, of course. And the stabilizer. Of course, the Virius is much better. But if you are in a budget, the Silka is still not bad at all. And they are actually pretty good, especially the Silka is very good for spammy decks when you want a lot of units grouped together. Of course, that comes with a disadvantage, and that's that they are much more vulnerable to artillery, but still they are very good. Now, missiles. Again, you have all kind of choices. The OSAs, which in my opinion in Red Dragon they are not as attractive as in Airland Battle, but still they are a pretty nice unit. Comes in decent availability and has a pretty decent missile. Very good range against helicopters and airplanes alike, and it's very fast. So yeah, it's a decent unit. The Thor, which is a really good unit. Extremely good helicopter and airplane range. Extremely good accuracy and pretty much, and it's also armored. So pretty much, I actually think that kind of renders the USA a little bit obsolete. If you can pick between both, usually you will go with the Thor. Then you have the books, the long range specialized anti-aircraft unit with a huge range, huge accuracy, brutal HE power. This thing is a beast. So this is really good. Of course, it's radar guided, so well, it's still vulnerable to enemy seed. But as an AA unit, is uncontested. This thing is the best long range AA unit in the game. Now, Strelas. You have two Strela vehicles. The 1M, which is actually not really good because you only get 4 missiles out of it, and the Strela 10M, which has a better missile to boot and has 12 of them. So if you can pick between both, go with the 10M without a doubt. Now, artillery, which is something that people like a lot. You have a whole range of artillery. You can go with the spammy, not accurate, short range versions. Usually, this column is less accurate, less range, more spam, to more accurate, more range, more spam. But this is a very special unit because it has a brutal ton of armor. Look at that, 5 front, 3, 2, 2. This thing is really resilient to enemy controlled artillery fire. So the MSTA is really a good unit. Also has a huge range and pretty decent accuracy. As for the heavy hitters, well, you have the 203mm Malkas and Peons. This is sniper artillery. It's not as flexible as the MSTA. So again, you want to choose whether you want a more flexible, more faster fighting unit, or a slower fighting but sniper artillery. Then, of course, you have the other favorite of the people, the rocket artillery. You get the Grab, which is not a specialized or really good unit, but still is kind of useful. You get the Uragan, which is especially brutal against a big concentration of enemy troops with this incredible AC power of 11. And you have the Smerch, which has cluster ammunition, and people tend to spam them a lot to try to hunt for enemy command vehicles. This is really good if you spot a concentration of enemy armor. This thing can wreak havoc versus them. So it's extremely good. It's also extremely expensive, but yeah, well, you get what you pay for. And finally, mortars. Now you get a choice of light hitting, fast firing mortar in the Basilevsk or the Pons or the Podnos, and the harder hitting, not that faster firing Nonas. Now this is kind of your choice. I actually like both. The Nonas have more range, they are much more harder hitting, so it's kind of a trade-off. You will decide. You have to try both to decide which one you like the most. I actually like the Nonas a lot. So yeah, that's support. Now tanks. And tanks, the Soviet unit is yet another thing of people say that the Soviet tanks suck. I think they are great. And I think they are great not because individually they are extremely good, but because you get a tank for every task. They are so good for so many different situations. And even when they may not be as good as other tanks, especially in the late game or the stronger tanks, they are still competitive against anything, and they have ways to beat even the best tank in the game. So well, let's comment on that. First, you get the cavalry tanks. Well, let's go one by one. Cavalry tanks first. T-34-85, people swear by this tank, and that is very useful. I think it's crap and it's useless, but well, up to you if you want to use something that you can get 32 tanks of, but it's not really combat worthy. This is good as mid shields, this is good as distracting enemies, but I don't think this is worth a card, to be honest. But well, people disagree, I don't know. You get the PT-90, which is an amphibious tank with an ATM. Not a great ATM, it's a Malyutka P, but well, still is an ATM. And an 90mm round. And you get the BMP, which is another amphibious unit, and with a pretty good gun to boot. And now let's go for the rest of the tanks. You have several different families in the Soviet Union. You have the T-55s, the T-62s, the T-64s, the T-72s, and the T-80s. Now the T-55s are kind of the medium tank, lighter tank versions. You go from the cheapest spammable tanks to the pretty combat-worthy ATM-fitted cheapo tanks, because for the price this is a pretty good tank. Same with the T-62, but I will say that the T-62 is not really worth it, especially so because of the rate of fire. With probably one or two exceptions, the T-62M and the T-62MB1, because they both get this. Well, they get one of them the Arkan, the other one gets the Sexna. Both are extremely good ATMs, and for the price, think of this as an ATM, as an ATM vehicle, and you are golden because you have a pretty good gun on top of a very good ATM. So for openers, especially, these tanks are really good. These two. The others are kind of lackluster. Now the T-64 line. Now this is one of the most useful lines in the game, and cost-effective ones. You go again from the more simple spammy tanks to the top of the line ATM fitted tanks. Now the BB is a little bit overpriced, but the BB1 is extremely good for the price, and the BM as well, and the B as well. Especially speaking, the ones with ATMs are extremely good. The T-64B is awesome. The BM is a step up in the ATM and in the, well, it's an overall because you get also some more armor, and the BB is really good. Maybe a little bit overpriced, but it still is really good. Also, you get good availability out of them, which is something you want to keep in mind. So yeah, really good family. Now T-72s, people say this tank sucks. I think this tank is great. At least I always do well with them. I don't know why. Again, you have the option to go from the vanilla very low cost one, which is actually pretty bad, to be honest, to the top of the line T72BU, which has 22 frontal armor, has a heck of an ATM, and a pretty good gun on top of that. Of course, rate of fire is not really great, but still is really good. And is a constant of the T72s. The late ones get really good ATMs on top of a pretty decent main gun, and they are all really well armored. And they are also pretty mobile, so yeah, there's also that. So yeah, you want to pick the one that suits your tastes, because you also have the vanilla version without any ATM, which is the T72B1 with a pretty good front armor, pretty good gun, but no ATM, but it's of course cheaper than the one with the ATM. So again, you get to pick whatever you want. I think it's a very good family of tanks. And finally, the T80. What I'm going to say about the T80, we all know the T80s. Extremely good tanks, from the most cheap and from to the most expensive one. Now for the Ghost, you want to compare, and this is one of the fun parts about the USSR. You want to compare them between them to see in the cost range which one is better. So you could go with the T80 and decide, is this better than the T64B? Well, you check, this one has an ATM, this one doesn't, this one has more speed or bigger autonomy or whatever, and you decide which one you want. The endline one, the T80UM, is kind of a faster firing, less armored T72BU with a better ATM, with a slightly better gun, but with lower armor. And it's also faster. This is kind of the puncher, and this is the hit taker, let's say it that way. And this is one of the things that people say, of course, that the T80UM or the T72BU are not as good as the Challenger 2, for instance. And that's true, the Challenger 2 is better than this 2. However, you get the chance to get both of them. And then if you want to be really bad, you can throw a T72B or a T72 T80U, sorry, on the deck to back it up. So what you don't have in quality, you have in numbers, which is actually pretty accurate for the USSR. So I think these are really good tanks for their purpose. You want to use them in numbers, and you want to take advantage of the fact that you have several cards of similar quality when other nations they only get one, because the United States only gets one N1A2 card, and you have to choose between one or two in availability. When with this, you can pick two cards of both, and you can go with two or three and one or two. So overall, I think is extremely competitive. Recon, a strong point again. The USSR is really good in everything. Very good recon vehicles, especially the BRM-1K is extremely good. Recon choppers, excellent optics in the ME9, in the ME24, and the KA-52. The KA-52 also has SEAD missiles and E-glass. Higher availability and less optics in the ME2. Generally speaking, the bigger recon of the USSR is really good, and you have the choice to go with standard recon infantry or Spetsnaz, or both actually. The Spetsnaz are two-man teams with exceptional optics and very good recon. Very good optics. Really good unit, really good. These things can really sneak up to the other side of the map, and the enemy won't see them. Really good unit. And finally, I want to make a mention for a brutal unit that I love, which is the BR-DM3. Now, might seem as a subpar recon unit, and actually it's a subpar recon unit. It only has good optics. However, as a fighting unit, 40% accuracy autocannon. This thing destroys enemies at a rate you wouldn't even believe. Rate of fire 150 rounds per minute with an accuracy of 40%. This is insane. Really, try this thing out. It's so fun. Pickles. Now, again, different categories, so let's go one by one. Fire support, hold on a second, there you go. Fire support is pretty much support units. You get, well, this is a very cost-effective unit, the ISU 85. You get BTR 152s, which are not extremely good, but well, they are still there. Then you have gun support in the shape of the Salo, which is an extremely fast unit with a pretty decent gun and also pretty cheap cost. So yeah, this is kind of a flanker, fast hitter, pretty good unit. And then you have the recoil rifle, which is not really good, and the star of the vehicles, which is the BMPT. This thing is so beastly. You have seen it in action in other of my videos, so I'm not going to even comment on that. Now, flamethrower tanks, pretty much straightforward, the TO 55 and 62, and the Buratino. Now, this is not a flamethrower tank, this is a Terminator. Simply brutal. Let's say it that way. This is a rocket launcher with napalm, and well, it has such a big effect. Well used, this thing is a game changer. Finally, tank destroyers, which comes in 80 gems, and again you have to make choices. Do you want the Concourse M, which is a better missile than the Sturm in what regards AP power, but the Sturm has the Cocoon, which has a huge range. The Concourse has higher speed, this has a better range. So again, choices, choices, choices. You can pick one, you can pick the other, you can pick both. So yeah, that's that. The SU-122, which is an extremely cost-effective unit, spammable, reliable, yeah, very good. The Norov, also a very good unit. Decent numbers, very cheap, really good gun, insane rate of fire. This is a really good unit. And then you have the Jeeps for cheap ATMs or cheap recoil rifles. So yeah, there's that. Now helicopters are one of the specialties of the Soviet Union. They get some of the best choppers in the game. The Akula with Igla missiles, ATMs, and these are extremely good ATMs with a range that very few AA can cope with, and a pretty good autocannon. Also is slightly armored and has an 8 strength, which is pretty good. Then you have the Mi-24s, which are really cost effective. They have always been. These are the attack Mi-24s. These ones, you want to use them as attack choppers. And the Mi-28. Now the Mi-28 has 16 attack missiles, which is a pretty insane number, but they don't have as many rockets as the Heinz, as the Mi-24s. So it's kind of, do you want the Atagas, which you can move after firing, and you have 16 of them, or do you want the Cocons, only 8 of them, but you get 80 rockets. So kind of something you want to, well, give a thought when building your deck. Finally, the cheaper helicopters, the Mi-4 and the Mi-4AB, one with only rockets, the only one with Malyutkas. The thing here is that they carry a heck load of rockets. 80 millimeter rockets for 35 points. Hell yes. As support choppers, they are extremely good. They are also very cheap, they are spammable, and if you lose them, you don't hit your face against the ground. While if you lose an Akula, it's a very big hit indeed. Finally, the air. And again, lots of choices. Let's go one by one. Air superiority, lots of choices and very good of them. Su-27s, 2 of them. One of them has fire and forget missiles, the other doesn't. If you have the choice of going with shorter range fire and forget missiles and longer range semi-active radar missiles, always go for the shorter range fire and forget. The fire and forget is so priceless. However, both Su-27s are extremely good. And look at the options you have here. You can load one card of Su-27S, one card of Su-27PU, and you still have more air superiority fighters. You can actually Fill your deck with air superiority fighters and shut down the skies for the enemy, something that I think no other nation can currently in the game. Jack 1-for-1s, really good for the price. One of my favorite planes of the game. It got nerfed not that long ago because now has less missiles, but still has 4 infrared missiles. They come in pretty good numbers, and the missile itself is extremely good. So as an anti-chopper or short-range fighter, this thing is really good. And well, then you get the Mi-25, which is not really good. Now, as for interceptors, you get the MiG-31s. I honestly think the interceptors are not worth it in this game because of the low accuracy of the missiles. But if you really want it, well, you can put one of or two of them in flight. I don't like them, but well, whatever. Then you have multi-role, which is kind of well trick. Well, actually, it's fun that the Su-25 is in the multi-role section, but it has AA missiles. I don't know. I would qualify this as an anti-tank unit, but whatever. You have the MiG-29s, which are extremely good AA units, and they also have bombs. You have the Su-25, which is a brutal unit. This is one of the best planes in the game. Against tanks, these things, well, what they do. The Su-27M, people swear by this plane. I don't like it, because you only get one. It's extremely expensive, and the missiles are great, and you still have some capability, but honestly, I will pick the Su-25 any day over the Su-27. If anything, because you can get 2 of them, because while you only get one Su-27. You get anti-tank, MiG-27s, very good unit. Su-25 is fun that this one is qualified as anti-tank and the other multi-role, but whatever. For the cost, it's a very good unit indeed. 140 points for these weapons, really good. And SEAD, you get a lot of choices again. Hold on a second. You get again 2 choices. MiG-25BM, one of the best SEAD planes in the game, and the Su-24, slightly worse but much cheaper. And yeah, that means that you can pick up to 3 SEAD planes for a deck if you want. So again, the thing is that you can tailor this for so much stuff. And finally, the bombers. Agile 102. Well used, this thing can be brutal, but it's too slow. Is for me is a point pinata to be honest. It's not as bad as in before, because before it was more expensive, but well used, this can be a game changer, but the problem is that it's really hard to use it well. Then you have MiG-21S, MiG-25 bomber version, which is kind of new to the game, was added recently. Su-24s with cluster ammunition, and Jack 38 with napalm or standard bombs. Now, what is this deck or nation good for? Well, hold on a second. By type, motorized. You don't get tanks, but you still got have very good ATGM ability with your ATGMs, with your vehicles, support vehicles. You get very good choppers. It's very competitive, but you don't get tanks. On the plus side, you get a ton of infantry. So very viable. I would say this is very viable. If you don't like playing with tanks, motorized is a very good choice. Armored. If you are good with tanks, this thing is beast. It's God mode. Especially so because I mean you can pack so much stuff of so different prices that you are going to never have no options with your tanks. Very viable, very good, very strong. Yeah. Support. Well, Buratinos, what I'm going to say. Smerces, what I'm going to say. All the AA in the world, what I'm going to say. Extremely good. Marines. very good, because you get a very good medium range fighter, which is the Yak 141, while most other nations with marine decks don't get such a long range fighter plane. Um, Very viable because infantry is also really good. Very viable. Mechanized, kind of a mixed world between motorized and armored, but not as specialized as both. It's kind of a jack of all trades, but the problem is that I don't think it's as good as any of both. I mean, if you like armored, go for armored. If you like infantry, go for motorized. This falls in the middle, and while it's still very good, don't take me wrong, there's potential into this deck. I would say that motorized or armor are better for the specialized. And finally, airborne. I would say this is not really worth it, and I'm going to say why. I see a lot of people with airborne USSR units, but I don't think it's viable, and the reason is this: you don't get any AA. It's as simple as that. You don't. You get the Strela 1, and it only has 4 missiles, and of course you can get, well, this crappy track with an anti-aircraft gun, and you can get a lot of E-glass and etc. But honestly, doesn't cut it. You need longer range missiles and AA cover to do well with a deck. I don't think airborne with the USSR is actually viable. Alone, if you are playing with someone who's supporting you with AA, of course, it's perfectly fine. So, well, this is the overview of the USSR. I hope you enjoyed this long review. Tell me which is the next deck you want to see the next. My plan is the USA, of course, but if you want to see something different, let me know. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and see you later.